while more people are joining us, I'm just going to very quickly do some announcements and then we'll get started. So my name is Jennifer Maddox and I coordinate the Kentucky Great Writers Series at the Carnegie Center, among other things. And this series featured authors who either live or have lived in Kentucky and have one or more works of high literary quality. We're excited to bring this event to you virtually as part of our Carnegie from Your Couch offerings, which is something brand new that the pandemic kind of led us into, but it's really created some great opportunities. And, you know, though the Carnegie Center building is closed right now, we're still offering much of our programs for writers, but it's now online, which makes it even more accessible to people. We have classes, workshops, mentoring. We have a manuscript service, the Carnegie Center Author Academy, and many more services. One of our new things that we're doing is the Kentucky Black Writers Collaborative, which is an exciting new initiative. And we'll probably do our Kentucky Writers Hall of Fame induction ceremony online, but that's still tentative, so we'll see. And an upcoming event that you all might be interested in that is free is our November 12th Writing Critique Night. Now, you do have to register for that, unlike when we did this in the past in person, but you will have a chance to submit your first page for a panel to critique and give you feedback. And we have a literary agent among the panelists, so it's an exciting opportunity. If you want to register for that or for any other Carnegie Center class or event, or you just want to learn more, just visit our website, www.carnegiecenterlex.org. And because we're doing things virtually, remember that you don't have to live in Kentucky to be able to participate. We even had somebody as far away as Hawaii taking a class. So we hope that no matter where you are, that you'll come and join us. And so now, let's see here, just a few more announcements. You know, I'd like to thank our sponsors, the Reitzel Cook Foundation, the Kentucky Arts Council, LexArts, WUKY, who's going to be rebroadcasting this later. And special thanks also to Nate's Coffee, who for years provided their delicious brew to all of our in-person attendees. And even though they won't be here tonight, you can still order it online if you want to have some of their coffee at home. And since we won't be hosting the open mic like we do if we were in person, then tonight our audience will get a chance to interact with our authors in a different way. We're going to be taking questions at the end of all three of the readings at the very end. Now, one of our writers on staff, Kimber, is going to actually be posting a link to our bookshop site so that you can buy these authors' books. And we sure hope that you will support them and their works by going to Bookshop, and the link will be shown soon in the chat window. And one of the good things about Bookshop is that at no additional cost to you, a little portion of your expense that night goes to the Carnegie Center as a gift, and another part of it goes to a local bookstore as a gift. So it's a great way to support Carnegie, support bookstores, and to support the authors. So we'll hope you'll definitely buy some books. And as I mentioned, there is a recording happening. So tonight's event is being recorded. It will later be rebroadcast on Carnegie Center's Facebook page and on our YouTube channel, and WUKY Radio, which is 91.3, will be rebroadcasting this a couple of times in November. So if you missed part of it, you'll get a chance to listen or see it later. So now we're going to start with readings from our featured authors. And, you know, as Carter is joining us, one of the things that, you know, struck me as we were preparing for this night is, you know, what makes Kentucky writers great? And some people say there's something in the water. Some people say that it's Kentucky's rich literary tradition, the oral storytelling that makes writers so good. And then some say that it's really just the supportive writing community that you find here in Kentucky, whether it's now virtual or in person. So who knows what it is? It could be all three, it could be one, the other, but no matter what, you're in store for some awesome readings tonight. And they are, of course, some of Kentucky's great writers. So first up, let's talk to Carter Sickels. So Carter, you've got yourself on mute. You can go ahead and unmute because we'll talk here. I'm actually here in my, as you could see, Carnegie from Your Couch. I took it quite literally. I'm on my couch. I live in Bourbon County, so that's where I'm broadcasting from today. So where are you broadcasting from today?
Well, I'm in my office at home, and I live in Lexington.
In
So
Lexington.
not too far away.
Not too far, absolutely. It would have been an easy drive to the Carnegie Center, but that's okay. Now you don't have to go out in the rain.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah. So, well, let me tell folks a little bit about you. And you know, looking at Carter, some of you all might say, I know this guy, I've met him. And you probably have. If you've been at the Carnegie Center, he's come to some of our literary readings and other events. He was one of the panelists for our writing critique night, one of the nights that we did this. And, you know, who knows, maybe some of you all are some of his students from Eastern Kentucky University. But if you've not met Carter, let me tell you just a little bit about him. His debut novel, The Evening Star, is now a movie that was filmed in Harlan, Kentucky, and it premiered at the Sundance Film Festival this summer, which is pretty exciting. Also this year, Hub City Press released his latest novel, The Prettiest Star, and it's had wide critical acclaim. Oprah's magazine named it one of the best LGBTQ books that'll change the literary landscape in 2020, which is a pretty significant statement to say. And, you know, there were numerous other media outlets, you know, that have named it to their must read or, you know, their most anticipated lists. And some of those were Entertainment Weekly, Book Riot, Indie Next Pick, and more. And one of the quotes that I'd seen in a review that really just tugged at me was the one from San Francisco Chronicle, where the reviewer said, "It is one of the most heart-wrenching novels I've read in a long time." And I think that says a lot. So now I'll let you hear from Carter yourself. So Carter Sickels.
Great. Well, thank you, Jennifer, so much for the introduction. Thank you to the Carnegie Center. And it's great to be here reading with Sheila and Jeremy. I wish we were all reading in person, but this is great too. And thank you all for coming. I'm just going to read a little bit from my novel, The Prettiest Star. So I'll just give you a quick setup. The novel is set in 1986, and it's about Brian Jackson, a young gay man who's been diagnosed with HIV. And he's been estranged from his family and living in New York since he was 18. And now that his boyfriend and many of his friends have died, he decides to return to the small town where he grew up in Appalachia, Ohio. And he comes back home, and his family want to keep his HIV status a secret and his sexuality a secret. And the novel moves between Brian's point of view, his mother's, and Jess. And Jess is 14 years old. And so she hasn't seen her brother since she was 8. And she doesn't know why he left or why he came back. And that secrecy kind of begins to weigh on her. So the part I'm going to read for you is just from Jess's first chapter. And then I'll read just a very short section from Brian's point of view. I guess the only thing to know, this is sort of the first chapter from Jess, and this is at the end of the chapter. So this is when Brian actually comes back. So he is returning to Ohio. And Jess has this kind of obsession and interest and love of whales. So she knows a lot about whales. Killer whales use echolocation to communicate. They call out, and the time an echo takes to come back to them tells them how far away an object is. The echoes help them to navigate and hunt and find each other. Echolocation is like a sixth sense. When I was little, I used to think that Brian and I could communicate telepathically, like the brother and sister in the movie Escape to Witch Mountain. I believed I could send him my thoughts like whale signals, and he would hear them. I was just a dumb kid. At night, after I said my prayers, I would close my eyes and listen to the pulsing of the dark, but I never heard any voice, never received any message. I'm in my room with the door cracked, Duran Duran on the boombox, volume turned low, so I can still hear my mother moving around in the kitchen, putting away dishes, making herself a cup of hot tea. My father is out in the garage. We're hiding from each other, waiting. The house smells like the pot roast we'd had for supper. Hot, soft potatoes melting between my teeth, stringy beef like veins. I could only eat a few bites. I stare at myself in the mirror. I don't look anything like Brian. I'm plain-faced with scattered freckles across my nose, boring brown hair, and boring brown eyes. I pull my hair back in a ponytail, then take it out again, and the ragged ends fall around my shoulders. My body looks soft and flat and weird. I've changed 3 times already. I'm wearing my only pair of Jordache jeans, a bright pink t-shirt, and Reeboks, the coolest clothes I own, but I don't look cool. A muffler rumbles underneath the music, Gus's truck. I thought we'd all go to meet Brian at the bus stop, but my mother said Brian didn't want a big to-do. From downstairs, Sadie barks. I count to 3, and then I go. I'm the first one at the door. I stand still, watch the knob turn like I'm one of those dumb girls in a horror movie, stuck in my tracks. Sadie is barking, wagging her tail. Gus steps in first. Rain trickles down the bill of his Chester Eagles hat and slides down his jacket. He wipes his boots on the welcome mat. He is carrying a big lime green duffel bag. Hey, Jess, he says. The door swings wider and a man walks in, his face shadowed by a blue hooded sweatshirt. He's wearing a jean jacket and black jeans and Nikes with a red swoosh. He pulls down his hood. For a second, I don't think it's him. He's skinnier than I remember and looks old, a grown-up. His hair isn't as blonde as it used to be. He wears it short on the sides and on top, longer in the back. His teeth are the color of tobacco juice, and his raggedy lips look dry and chapped. Stubble on his chin. He reminds me of the pictures I've seen of drug addicts. Maybe he's a junkie. Jess, he says, and his voice is the same. It's deja vu hearing him talk. You've gotten so old. What are you, like 30 now? 14, I say. He sets down a small silver suitcase and stands close enough to hug me, but doesn't. Keeps his bony hands at his sides, and I don't make a move toward him either. I don't know him and feel shy. Sadie whines at his feet, pushes her muzzle into his legs, and he crouches down and digs his knobby fingers into her fur. You got old too, Sadie, Brian says. When he stands, I see a little gold hoop in the right ear, delicate, the shape of a fingernail. I can't remember which is the bad one to have pierced, right or left, gay or straight. The air shifts, thins out. It isn't just the 3 of us anymore. My father moves slowly up the stairs, and my mother comes out of the kitchen. They stand next to me about 3 feet from Brian. Big Gus tries to scrunch himself in the corner of the doorway, tucking his fat chin like he doesn't want anyone to see him. You must be hungry, my mother says. Run into any flooding? Asks my father. 6 years he's been gone, and this is how they greet him, like he just went out to the store for cigarettes. We crowd in close, no one touching. My father looks at the grease rag in his hand like he had no idea how it got there, and balls it up and stuffs it in his hip pocket. Glad you made it okay, he says. He takes a step forward, standing a head taller than Brian, and clamps his hand on Brian's shoulder. Just as quickly as he touches him, my father reaches his hand back. But it's enough. Him touching Brian like that seems to break something in my mother, like she has just realized who this is. And she lets loose a quiet sigh and goes to him with open arms. Brian, taller by a few inches, keeps his head lifted, looking behind her at the wall. My mother stands with her back straight and her arm around him, holding him, but not, uncomfortable, the way boys are when they slow dance, all stiff. No boy has ever asked me to dance, but in gym class last year, old Miss Prescott put us in pairs and made us learn the waltz. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Where's Mama? Brian asks, stepping back from our mother. She decided to wait and tell her tomorrow, she says. We decided to wait and tell her tomorrow, she says, so she'll be surprised. Brian's disappointed. I was expecting to see her. Gus says he has to hit the road and slaps my brother on the back. I don't want Gus to go. His big, soft presence takes away some of the weirdness in the room. The gold beam of headlights drizzles through the windows as Gus backs out of the driveway. Then it's quiet again, all of us still and standing in the same place until Brian walks around us and goes into the living room. He looks up and down and around. Nothing's changed, he says. I've got a pot roast warming in the crock pot, my mother says. Brian sits at the table and our mother dishes an enormous helping of pot roast into a bowl and sets it in front of him. All of us in the kitchen together for the first time in 6 years. My parents are trying to make conversation and act like this is normal. The light over the stove gives off a yellow glow. We are in a dream, the three of us standing here watching him eat, the rain falling, the air heavy and fragile, like at a funeral. And I guess that's what it is in a way, because I think just for a split second that my brother has come back home to die. And I'll read one other short section for you so you can hear Brian's voice. Brian is a video artist. He's an artist, so he has a video recorder with him, and he records himself, makes these sort of monologues, and those are how his sections in the book are framed. So I'll read one of those. They're kind of video diaries. And his grandmother, his mama, is one of the only people in the family who really stands by him and is not ashamed in the way that some of the other family members are. So this is just a short scene with her. June 27th, 1986. Today, I was watching TV with my grandmother, and Tammy Faye Baker was on, singing about Jesus, and Mama looked at me. Honey, even if you don't go to church, God will listen to your prayers, she says. Good Lord. Was she trying to tell me to get right with God? Does she worry I'm headed to hell? Tammy Faye doesn't seem to believe in a punishing kind of God, and I don't think my grandmother does either. As Tammy Faye blinked her mascara-thick lashes, I was reminded of drag queens I knew in New York. I wouldn't mind going to church with Tammy Faye, I said, especially if she'd let me do her makeup. Mama giggled. Big alligator tears started to run down Tammy Faye's glittery pink cheeks. Oh, there she goes. Anything can set her off, Mama said. When I was little, on Avon nights, we'd sit at the table and Mama would make lists of what she sold and what she needed to reorder. I'd help organize everything, lining up mascara wands, tubes of lipstick, flat-pressed squares of eyeshadow, moisturizer that smelled like flowers, eye cream. I loved the dark green bottles of perfume, the elegant gold cases of rouge. My grandmother didn't care if my hands fluttered. She asked my opinions. She trusted my taste. I think Mama would love to see a drag queen. Sometimes I'd help friends with their makeup, but I only did drag a couple of times myself. I never performed or went out in public, didn't have the nerve or the courage. But still, when I sat in front of a mirror and brushed on blush and eyeshadow, glued on eyelashes, I felt a wild shock of delight. Boys came to me because I had the right touch. A few of them are dead, others sick, others infected. They were thrilled to be wearing makeup and sparkling gowns and wigs, and to be free from their father's disappointment and shame. They were so beautiful. And I will stop there, but thank you all.
Thanks so much, Carter. And next up, we have Sheila Williams. And Sheila, there she is. Okay, so Sheila, where are you coming to us from today?
I am coming from Newport in Campbell County.
Ah, Northern Kentucky.
Yes.
Nice.
Yes.
Ah, I'm just a little bit north of Lexington, so I'm not north, but I'm definitely not south either. So,
yes.
You know. Yeah. So I'm going to tell our audience a little bit about Sheila. You know, she is the author of 5 novels featuring female characters who were survivors, who challenge what life has given them and strive for something more. In 2019, there was a Netflix movie named called Juanita, which was based on Sheila's novel, Dancing on the Edge of the Roof. And once you see the movie trailer, you're going to want to watch this movie for yourself. It looks fantastic, even just in that little bit of a movie that they show you there. And now Sheila's 2020 novel, The Secret Women, was released this June. And once that happened, you know, it quickly gained national attention. It was selected as one of the best books to read by Time Magazine, Parade Magazine, Women's World, BookBub, She Reads, and many others. And, you know, although I just met Sheila actually just a few minutes ago, as much as you can meet someone face-to-face virtually, we met for the first time just a little bit ago. You know, I had the pleasure of watching her when she was on the Kentucky Book Festivals they had a virtual event last month, and I got to see her there, and I was just really excited that we'd asked Sheila, because I thought, this is a woman I know I would love, and I'd give her a hug if I was there in person with her. So, but now you're going to get to see why Sheila is such a delight. So I'm very pleased to give you Sheila Williams.
Jennifer, thank you so much. I really am looking forward to this. I will be reading from I should say a work in progress, but it will be published in 2022 by Amistad HarperCollins. It is entitled Things Past Telling, and it is my homage to my female ancestors. It is the story of a woman whose name in North America is Miriam, and she was born in West Africa in the 1760s, and she dies sometime after 1870 in Highland County, Ohio. So as you can imagine, her life is quite a journey. And so I'm going to read a section of that book, Things Past Telling. This is part of chapter 15, Daughter of a Strange God. White Maple Grove, Chesapeake County, Virginia. My labor was bought by a man named Robert Nash of Chesapeake County, Virginia. It took 6 weeks to travel from Savannah to Nash's farm, a journey near as long as the one I took across the dark waters. Maybe because Mr. Nash trade, buy and sell along the way, makes so many stops at farms, at villages. Mr. Nash know every person there is on this road, and he call them by name. The ones he don't, he make it his business to find out. He calls that commerce. Nash was a pink-faced man with reddish hair and the thinnest lips I ever seen on a person. His blue eyes were watery-like, and he blinked a lot as if the sun and the air worried him. He spoke the slurring mixture of English common in this part, accented with bits of words that I recognized from the Irish. He looked like a walking slug with his stick legs and round belly, but he think and move quick like a bird. He cleared away space in the back of the wagon for me to sit, pointed and scurried away as if he was afraid he'd catch something. His man, Durfee, who spoke the Irish, snorted and held out his hand to help me up. When I took it, he clamped down so hard that I near shouted in pain. Durfee pulled me towards him and spoke close in my ear. Won't chain you down 'cause he say so, but I know you people better and he think he do. His hot breath came in puffs against my cheek. I don't care if you are worth your weight in gold, 500 pounds of tobacco. Try to run, I'll shoot you. He half lifted, half shoved me into the wagon. The wagon was driven by Jupiter, Nash's colored man. Nash and Durfee rode alongside. Jupiter nodded in my direction but did not speak. What he knew or thought, he kept to himself. The buckboard was past full of supplies, sacks of grain, crates of port and other spirits, protected from the bumps by straw and old cloth, boxes of crockery, what called china, bolts of fabric and other treasures, as Nash called his purchases, and me, along with a large leather satchel that looked fit for the midden heap. This is an old physics bag. I bought it off a tinker, Nash had told me, thrusting the sack into my arms. You can make use of it on your visits. I was one of Nash's purchases too, a treasure like his bottles of wine and heavy books. Unlike the port, I was to earn him what he called a return on his investment. To my surprise and his, I did just that before we traveled even 10 miles. By midday, we came across a wagon turned over in the road, wheels split. The driver had fallen off, hit his head, and it was bleeding. His woman was wailing and held her arm, her face red with cuts. The contents of the wagon were scattered across the ground like fallen leaves, and the horses had run off. My life as Master Robert Nash's colored medicine woman began there and didn't let up until the buckboard rolled into the yard of the quarters at White Maple Grove weeks later. We stopped in Charleston and treated 4 men with the flux, including Mr. Nash, 2 with disruption of the bowels, and 5 whose stomachs gave out from too much rum. I set 1 broken arm and 2 shoulders dislodged from a fight, eased the monthlies of the innkeeper's daughter, and the troubles of the innkeeper too, whose foot was near unrecognizable due to gout. Eased a poor girl's breathing, she had the consumption. helped a Welsh barber amputate a rotting leg, and was near sick myself from it. Made a poultice for a woman whose man had punched her in the eye. In Carolina, in a cluster of homesteads, I tended to a baby, treated stomach ailments, and soothed the misery of a washerwoman. Her mistress, several months gone with the baby, waddled up to me after having a few words with Mr. Nash. Mr. Nash says you can treat ailments and such. My Nancy, she's poorly, has been for a month, says her head won't stop aching. Aside from her huge belly, the woman was thin as a stick and rabbit-looking, 2 yellow teeth protruding from her lips. I think she's malingering, but my husband... She looked over her shoulder at the tall man standing near the wagon in heavy conversation with Durfee. The man looked more like her grandfather than husband. My husband, Mr. Robinson, gives his permission for you to tend to her. Yes, mistress, I murmured. I followed Mistress Robinson along an alleyway of cabins, and she stopped and gestured toward a small hovel that looked near to coming down on top of whoever was inside. In there, she said. Her spooky-looking gray eyes stopped on my face. Nancy was born in country like you. Her words dripped with vinegar. In country mean this Nancy came from across the dark waters. I went to the open door and stopped, tapped on the door frame. What you want? The woman's voice was low and raspy, as if she'd been coughing hard or crying. Ibu. I gave my true name. Here they call me Miriam. I am sent by your mistress to tend you. I spoke in her words. Nancy was standing in front of me before I finished speaking, her face streaked with tears, her eyes rimmed in red. Her mouth was open in astonishment. You are? She was a woman of my mother's age, her hair covered by a white kerchief. She looked as if she had been crying for weeks. Yes, Aunt, I answered, touching her gently on the arm. I am a daughter of the Edo and a midwife, but I come to tend your head. She closed her eyes. My throat closed up. I am sorry, Aunt, but I cannot tarry. I travel with Master Nash, and his man will come soon to fetch me. What has made your head ache so? I asked her to be polite, to be respectful of her, but I knew grief when I saw it. She turned her face towards mine and made a fist of her hand and pressed it against her chest. Little sister, she said in Ibu, her voice thick, it is not a sickness of the head, but of... She pounded her chest lightly. Her voice descended into a sob. Master Wesley sold my man away. To... Nancy spoke the name of the place where her man had been sold, but I didn't know it. I didn't know the English colonies. Would it have mattered if I did? Her man was gone. If I had learned anything in my time around the English, he would not return. And she was in grief. I thought of the little Fulani woman who had tended to me on the slaver, who watched after me after my sister, the woman who helped me back to the land of life. Who would watch over Nancy? Who would bring her back? There was little I could do. Her wound would not heal. It would seep until the day that she died. She knew it. I knew it. I bathed her head and eyes with rose water, left her a packet of chamomile to make a tea that would help her sleep. I massaged her shoulders, rubbing in the soft scented oils of a salve of lemongrass that Marie Catherine had taught me to make. I did what I could to soothe her body, knowing there was nothing I could do for what truly ailed her, nothing I could say to take the pain away. We thought you were gone away. Durfee came to fetch me. He watched as I took leave of Nancy, using what words of respect I could remember in her tongue, giving her what blessings I knew in mine. I stood before her and we clasped hands, our foreheads touched. He scowled at me. She's one of those Africans like you. I said nothing. I never heard of African until I came here. What's wrong with her? Mistress Robinson said she's lazy. I wanted to whirl round, grab the cutlass that I knew he kept at his side in his belt, and slit his throat. What Caesar and the Frenchman had taught me in case I had to protect myself, they said. But I showed him. Master Robinson sold her man away to a place called Alabama. Now it was the Irishman's turn to say nothing until we reached the wagon, but he was burning to know. As he handed me up into the buckboard, he asked, "You took long enough to bid her farewell. What did you say to her in your African tongue?" I studied his pale face, looked into his dark storm sky blue eyes. Durfee wasn't bad looking as far as the pink faces go, but he had a mean way about him. There was a river of bitterness flowing just beneath his skin. I say goodbye. Thanks.
Wow, two very powerful readings from our novelists tonight. And the interesting thing is both of them brought us to different time periods, and the way that they did it, by the detail, and, it just, you felt like you were there, whether you experienced that time period or not. It was just so real and vivid. So thank you, Sheila, and also again to Carter. And to our audience, we're going to have one more reader here in just a moment, but I did want to remind you we have that Q&A feature at the bottom of the screen. So I hope that you will put some questions in there that you might like for, to ask these authors later on tonight. So don't forget to do that. And so now we'll go on and have Jeremy join us. I see him. There he is. Hi, Jeremy. So where are you coming to us from today?
From my basement office in Lexington, Kentucky.
Two Lexingtonians,
No.
And yet, you're not even at the Carnegie Center. We could have just had you there. So close. No.
It's a lovely space and we miss it.
Absolutely. Now, Jeremy, as I was putting together your intro, I was trying to think of all the many ways that you've been involved with the Carnegie Center. I mean, I know you've done Kentucky Great Writers with me, but I know that you've been at the Carnegie Center for other things too. And I just feel like that I wouldn't do it justice, but what are some of the things that you've been involved with at Carnegie?
Well, I've been part of the Hall of Fame celebrations. Been one of the persons that have read for that. Last fall, when the Kentucky State Poetry Society was housed at the Carnegie Center, we were there. We go by from, when we had things like Lex Arts, the gallery hop, we would swing by. And being that I teach just right across the park at Transylvania, pop down to the center quite frequently. Though perhaps one, and this is connected to this book, the illustrator that illustrated the book that I'll be reading from tonight, she and I put together a benefit reading for the Hurricane Maria benefit for Puerto Rico. She did the broadside of a poem that we used to raise some money, and the Carnegie Center generously let us do that.
I knew that there were several, because I see you a lot, and I thought, I'm not going to do it justice. So yeah, thank you for sharing that. And I do remember seeing a lot of those things, as you mentioned. Now, to the people who may not know Jeremy, he did mention, he's just right across the park from the Carnegie Center at Transylvania University, and there he's a professor of Spanish. But he's multilingual. Jeremy was born in Italy. He grew up in the Caribbean and in Central America. I believe he speaks German as well. So he has many talents. He's also an Afro-Latin poet. He has a chapbook that came out a few years ago called Broken Tulips. And this guy has a lot going on right now, because Under the OCELOT Sun, which he just showed you the cover for, that came out this summer, and he has 2 forthcoming books, World as Sacred Burning Heart, and the other, I'm going to see if I can say this in Spanish, Auto Retrato como una iguana.
Muy bien hecho.
Okay. Which is Self-Portrait as an Iguana. And the latter will be published in English and in Spanish. And it won the inaugural Poeta Nueva York Prize from the Spanish publisher, and I'm going to see if I could say this right, Valparaíso or Priso
Valparaíso.
Ediciones. On the Transy website, Jeremy is quoted as saying, "There exists no divide between language and culture." And when I read that, I thought, that's why his poems, some of which are in, places that are far away from here, you'll identify with the universal images and with the feelings that they invoke, which are just as universal, for all of us. We all know these and experience these as humans. So now I'd like to welcome Jeremy Paden. Thank you, Jeremy.
Well, thank you, Jennifer, for that very generous introduction. And thank you, Carnegie Center, for hosting the event and all of the sponsors. And what a joy it is to be able to read with Carter and with Sheila, and how difficult you put it to me. And I might be saying that in the way we say it in Spanish, but how to be the poet following two such wonderful novelists that did such a lovely job of creating worlds and creating characters. I will read from mostly the latter half of Under the Ocelot Sun, and I'm gonna skip around just a little bit, partly because there are some wonderful illustrations by Anelisa Hermosilla. Like I said, she's an artist who I've collaborated with. She's Panamanian, and we knew each other because she came to Transy and graduated 2 years ago. The story is about a mother telling her daughter stories of who she is and stories of why they have left Honduras to make the trek to the U.S. border, and now they sit at the U.S. border. It starts with this: "Somos gente de maíz, mija. We are people of the corn, mija. People of the corn make their home in the forest," abuela would say, "where quetzal and cotinga sing, near rivers and streams that leap free." Abuela came from the mountains. She knew each tree by name. She told me the stories I tell you so I would know who I was. She told of when families lived in mountain villages and maíz was grown in milpas with frijoles and tomates. This was before failed crops, late frosts, before floods and drugs drowned Tegus. Mija, it's not that once there was peace and now there's none. You, me, abuela were born in an age of war, born under the Ocelot sun. Before the cartels, there were the Contras. Before the Contras, the football war and the banana wars and the wars of liberation. But there's beauty too in Tegus. When you were a Chichi, artists took over an abandoned state prison, crumbling under the weight of all the violence those walls had witnessed. Jugglers, drummers, and butterflies on stilts partied in the prison quad. You left a handprint in purple and a handprint in yellow. They turned the prints of the children into a field of flowers. But we need to eat, and hope buys no food. Your tío, Misael, who rode La Bestia north for work until they sent him back, broken, came with us to the prison party. He was sober, still living. Cousin Carmen and Mar, her daughter, also came and celebrated with us. They helped paint flowers on the wall. This was before the gang stole Mar, before the needle stole Carmen. So many girls, mija, lost, swallowed by the hungry belly of the earth. and hunger, a different hunger, has led us here. A hunger for peace, for justice. Mija, those birds we'd never seen, the quetzal and the scarlet macaw, are a treasure protected by laws. And you are more precious than they. That's why we've pushed, pulled, carried you north through jungle heat, hidden you from guards on the hunt. That's why we've come, indios, mestizos, garifuna, catrachos, guanacos, chapines. Together we've crossed rivers, mountains, cities, and borders. We've brought you to this waiting place, this arid land of rattlers and coyotes, to this wall. Precious things are worth 1,000-mile walk, mija. They are worth hunger and risk. And treasures, mija, are worth dying for, if that means those treasures are given a chance to live. Mija, we are a people who find a way, a people who survive. Mija, we are a people of the corn. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeremy Paden, and thank you also again to Carter Sickels and to Sheila Williams for reading with us tonight. You all had some very powerful readings, and every word that you all read, I could tell that you all had toiled over it to find just the right one. Poets are very famous for that because they know the value and the weight of even a single word, but even our novelists, such vivid descriptions for the same reason. So now we're going to get into some questions, and I don't see any from our audience yet. That doesn't mean that you can't send them now, but I'm going to go on and ask a question that I prepared, and we can start with Carter or with whoever would like to be first to answer the question. But November is National Novel Writing Month. And so for a lot of people like me, you're going to be trying to write 50,000 words inside of a month. In Lexington, June is Lexington Poetry Month. And so poets try to write a poem a day. So they're doing a ton of writing during that month. So what advice would you all have for people who are writing first drafts, whether it's of a novel or of a poem?
You want to go ahead, Jeremy? Or
I was going to say, since she's talking about novels and 50,000 words in a month, that's sometimes I'm happy to get 25 words in a month. I think one is two, I guess, is to trust the sound that's coming. I mean, words will come with a certain sound and a certain rhythm, and to follow that is one. And two, to let the fact that that down the line you'll be editing, let that free you. Let that free you to play as much as possible.
Very good advice. Very good. And
yeah.
So we've temporarily lost Sheila. That's one of the things that happens with technology. So I'm going to move on to Carter, and I'd love to hear your advice.
Yeah, I mean, I think similarly with the novel writing, I would say kind of with the first draft, really let the characters or the story itself, draw you in and follow whatever path they're sort of taking you on. So if the characters are kind of pulling you in one direction that you didn't initially plan, to kind of go with that and not to worry if you're going writing out of chronological order, to just follow that path. Because I think similar to what Jeremy said, it's like, it is a first draft and you just want to get those pages out, but also be committed. And a first draft is a first draft. So it's not the end draft. So you're going to have to come back and do the really deep, hard work of rewriting and revision. And you have to be sort of immersive in that. So I think, just try not to sort of skate around the edges, but just kind of dive, plunge in as deeply as you can.
So as we've heard, it doesn't matter if you're doing poetry, if you're doing a novel, first draft, it's revision. You're going to come back to it. And, you know, also just letting things come out and see where they take you. So some really good advice. Thank you too. We have a question from an audience member right now. And we have readers, but we also have writers in the audience. And so this is a writing question. What was your favorite part of the writing process for the work you just shared? Who would like to go first? It doesn't matter.
I mean, I think for me, the novel took about 5 years, 4.5, 5 years to write. So I think for me, once I really understood what the book was and what the book was about, was a couple of years into it, you know, where I felt deeply sort of connected to these characters, and I understood kind of where it was going. I still had a lot of work to do, but I could sort of see the end. And so my ending of the novel came a couple of years into it. And when I had that, I had a kind of a direction and a movement to go. So that felt like a sort of transformative moment for me in the process.
Well, this is a much shorter, it's a much shorter thing. Though I guess for me, the most fun part of it was working on translating it. So I when writing it, I knew that I wanted it to be in translation. And so one of the things that I was thinking through was a form for it. While the illustrated, when we put it into the illustrated form of the book, we didn't follow the organization, or we didn't follow the form that it was originally written in. I had originally written it in a ballad form, which is a 4-line stanza. And I chose that because both English and Spanish have ballad forms that are used for storytelling, and they tend to be used for popular storytelling. Right, your older folk and your older sort of country music uses ballad forms. Your corridos in Mexico use ballad forms, and the ballad form of the corrido goes all the way back to the medieval period. But thinking about that structure and knowing that I wanted it translated was one of those fun things, and then just working on the translation was another. And part of that, translating it then became part of a process of revision as well.
Now, when you say translated, do you write it in English first or Spanish first?
This was written in English first.
Okay, because I know you're fluent in both, so it could be either.
Yeah, one of the collections that you mentioned, the Iguana collection, a lot of those were written in Spanish first.
Okay, great. And Sheila is connecting with us. Hi, Sheila. We're so glad you were able to come back. So you're just in time for a question. So, and the other two guys have answered this. So of the piece that you just read, what was your favorite part of the writing process for that work?
For that particular work, my favorite part was all of the research. It took me 5 years to write the book. It's taken a lifetime of research because a lot of this is based on family history. So I've been putting all of those pieces together, trying to find out what the story is and who the characters are, and then transforming them into a fictional structure. So that's been the best part of it.
And when you say research, do you have to, where do you find research that goes back that far? What were some of your sources?
A lot of historical records, genealogical records, census, land records, property ownership records, wills, the history of the United States, colonial history. I also pursued records in West Africa and the cultures there, the different cultures there, the languages, And then also, because my main character is a midwife, I did some research in terms of that craft, and how it's approached by women of different cultures, European cultures, African cultures, indigenous cultures. So there was a lot of work to be done. I'm still doing research on this character.
Wow. Okay, I'll ask a question, audience. Still, you can put your questions out there. I'm going to ask one of mine. Now, with both Sheila and with Carter, each of them have a novel that was transformed into, or the basis for, a film. And with Jeremy, of course, as we mentioned, he had a work that's, in English, also in Spanish. So for both of those, situations, film and translations, they had a broader audience. And so my question for you all is, through these expanded audiences, what is the most important message that you hope that people will take away from your work?
Carter, you get to go first.
Okay. I thought maybe you would want to, since we lost you for a minute. Sure. So my first novel is The Evening Hour, which was, adapted into a film, a feature-length film, which showed at Sundance, and we are hoping that maybe in the spring it will be available, but we're still working on that. And it takes place in West Virginia, with part of the story is about mountaintop removal coal mining. And I think, although the movie was actually shot in Harlan, Kentucky, and I don't know if I have like a particular singular message, but I think what I really would love for people to take away is just, I hope, what is a complicated portrayal of Appalachia that shows it as a tender and troubled place, and gives you kind of a nuanced depiction of class and masculinity and intimacy. So that's what I hope people take away from it, is that view.
Great.
For my part, I was anxious that Juanita, who's the main character of Dancing on the Edge of the Roof, would rise to the top, as she does in the book, and would make her statement. And that did take place in the film. Alfre Woodard did an amazing job and really inhabited the character and her feelings and her dreams for herself, and this adventure that she took, which terrified her on many levels, but enriched her life. And I think it enriched the lives of those who read the book, and also those who watched the film and enjoyed it.
Right.
One of the things, right? I mean, so it's in English and in Spanish, and it's a story of migration, and it's a story of leaving Honduras and coming here, and those are two very different audiences: an American audience and a Spanish-speaking audience. In fact, a Spanish-speaking audience. Who many are immigrants, and who many have made this journey. So I don't know that I'm gonna answer your question in terms of what I hope people get out of it, but what I will say is the sense of responsibility I felt in terms of telling this story, to be able to speak for people whom I dearly love, for people whom I have grown up with and am in contact with, and for people who I know that also have made this trek. So my hope in terms of in terms of an American English-speaking audience, is a humanization of the immigrants from Central America, and even though it's slight, an understanding of or the mentions are slight, an understanding of the complicity of American foreign policy, which I guess that's all really heavy and only mentioned in that list of wars, among other things, but an understanding of the complicity of American foreign policy as it relates to the economic and the socio-political situation of the Northern Triangle countries.
Okay,
So.
great. Yeah, I hadn't thought about that, the fact that there's two different audiences and they're going to take a very different personal view of this. Of course, that's true of all the readers, though, who read books. You know, when they read it and you say hospital, everybody has something different in their head. You know, that's universal. But then there's these other things that we just don't know about. And seeing it from one side or the other, wow, it's great that this is in both those languages so that people can see both sides of that story. So, okay, we have one more question. Now for many people during the pandemic and with everything that's on in the news, and of course there's this thing called an election happening soon with all this stuff going on, you know, sometimes people just want to retreat into books and to get lost into books and find comfort, or at least I do, and find nourishment in, you know, a good story and give us renewed strength. So what books may have fed your soul recently? Aha, Sheila's going to be showing us something, I have a feeling. Oh, you're on mute.
There, this one, Cherie Demoine, Empire of Wild. This one.
Thank you.
I cried, okay. And I love mysteries. Louise Penny's newest one is one I'm reading as well.
A little bit of everything there.
Yes, I always have 2 or 3 books going at a time, you know, depending on the mood.
Great.
I just read, I reread Giovanni's Room by James Baldwin. So it's a beautiful story, dark story. And then I'll hold up this book, which I just finished, called The Great Offshore Grounds by Vanessa Veselka, which I loved and highly recommend. Many different storylines, and it's just a great book about kind of just about this country and a lot about class. But
I've been recently reading the poetry of Fernando Pessoa. He's a Portuguese poet, and I have very much enjoyed that. I've also highly recommend Isabel Wilkerson's Cast. I recommend it because there are both these beautiful lyrical essays and moments of where her prose just soars, and what she can do with metaphor and conceit and extended conceit as ways of trying to understand the U.S. and race relations in the U.S. and also those moments are sit right next to really good, clear, journalistic and historical storytelling and prose and research. I think if someone wants to see how to tell a story. Both of her books are wonderful examples of narrative arcs. I mean, the other book being under the warmth of, I mean, the warmth of other suns. And so I can't recommend her enough.
And Jeremy, say her name one more time.
Isabel Wilkerson.
Isabel.
And I can pull it off the shelf, Cass, if you need to see it. I'm sure many of us have, but.
Ooh, yes, definitely. Okay, great. Thank you. I did say there was one more question. Actually, I have a parting question for our authors. So the parting question is, where can people go to find out more about you and your writing? Carter?
Well, you can just go to my website, Carter Sickels, www.cartersickels.com. And I have all my information there. You can also follow me on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. I'm on all the things. So
my website is SheilaJWilliams.com. I'm on Facebook as well with that name, and I'm on Instagram, but not under my name, under Dancing on Edge too.
And I don't have a simple website that's just my name, so I'll paste it here. It's a Wix site that I have not gone through and made just my name. But you can find more about me there. And I'm hardly ever on Twitter. It's mainly my partner will DM me stories that she wants me to follow or read. That's how I pretty much use Twitter, but I am on Facebook and Instagram.
Okay, great. And for our audience at home who are watching, the links to our authors' books are right there in the chat window. And if you're one of our listening audience for WUKY, go to the Carnegie Center's bookshop site. And then Jeremy, I see that we have a different site for you, SMP Books. So what does SMP Books stand for?
Shadeland House Modern Press. They are a local Lexington publishing house that do novels, do nonfiction history, and they also have a couple of full-length collections of poems.
Mm-hmm. Okay, great. So, I hope our viewing audience and listening audience, you'll go to those websites and you'll buy some books. Thanks to our audience for coming. Thank you so much, to Carter, to Sheila, and Jeremy, for sharing these really deep readings and powerful stories, with us tonight, and for answering some questions, even some that, I felt like, that's a little bit of a complicated question, but you all answered beautifully. So even better than I would have imagined. So thank you all so much. And to everyone, good night.
Thank you.
Good night.
you all.